After pumping in $2 trillion, America's Afghanistan chapter of war against terror gets wound up. But the US is not leaving Afghan soil after a victory over the Taliban. Rather, it has signed a contract with its enemy, which in all probability will not even be honored. ET tries to decode the American failed attempt in Afghanistan with Indrani Bagchi of Times News Network. Pakistan has always been known for backstabbing US in its Afghan project. Indrani, what, according to you, other than Pakistan, were the big reasons for US failure this time?
It's a long story. I think the first part of the story would be the fact that the Americans took their eye off the ball back in 2003. After defeating the Taliban, not being able to, even though they were not able to catch Osama bin Laden, the Americans moved away from Afghanistan in 2003, went off to do another war in Iraq. If you remember, that gave the Taliban and their supporters in Pakistan a lot of leeway at a time when there was a lot of money coming in, but there was not a lot of American military interest in Afghanistan. And we must remember that. Second, when the Taliban restarted their surge, the resurgence of the Taliban, which I would say dates back to about 2006 to 2008, the plan never changed. Nobody changed the plan. They moved from troops to drones, drone attacks, etc. But the plan didn't change. And looking back in hindsight, you could also see a couple of other things. One is the dependence on Pakistan, because there was no other way to approach Afghanistan for logistics. Pakistan was very important for logistics. Pakistan was very important for the fact that it occasionally gave up Al-Qaeda operatives, Al-Qaeda leaders to the US. And to keep that pipeline going, the Americans actually turned a blind eye to what Pakistan was actually doing in Afghanistan. That's all recorded history. After, you could have said that after America got bin Laden in 2011, they should have rolled back down and out of Afghanistan and got out of the way then. But in the past few years, the Taliban have improved A, their position, B, their resources, C, their utility to Pakistan. And at this point, I would say the trigger was the fact that the US used Pakistan to basically sign an exit deal with the Taliban for the US, because the war was becoming unsustainable for America. And it's true. I mean, for 20 years, why would you want to stay in a war which is losing traction in America? You're losing your people, you're losing treasure, but you're not winning any influence or anything else. America, in many ways, for its own sake, should have walked away a long time ago. What it did in 2020 was sign a deal with the Taliban with spurious promises by the Taliban. Everybody knew they were spurious when they were being written, of not having any truck with Al-Qaeda or any other international terror organizations. Report after report from the UN, from the US, from other stakeholders in Afghanistan have proved that to be wrong, that the Taliban continue to have close relations with Al-Qaeda. The fact is that Pakistan kept its hand on on both Al-Qaeda and Taliban, did not let issues like bin Laden's assassination be too much of a setback for them. And they have continued. So in a way, Today's development is actually a win for Pakistan and a loss for America.
After the US retreat, will China have a bigger share over the natural resources of Afghanistan, with Pakistan as a key ally? Where do you see Afghanistan heading towards after all this?
That is, I would say, an attractive conclusion. I don't think reality will work out in the way that we think it will. First, China is not a newcomer in Afghanistan. It is not waiting in the wings. It has been in Afghanistan for a long time. It was one of the first countries to actually take control of the copper mines outside Kabul. When India was negotiating for the Hajigak iron ore mines up in the north, China was also negotiating. China won several of them. China has not been able to do too much over there, even in the years of relative prosperity and relative peace in Afghanistan, because conditions on the ground very different from what the conditions we read about in the papers. Second, Pakistan has not been able to get the Taliban to give up, shall we say, the Uyghur movement from China. And all the money that China is able to throw at it. Please remember, the Americans threw a lot more money at Afghanistan, and all the money that China is willing to throw at it does not, when push comes to shove, never good enough for the ideology that the Taliban espouses. So if you think that the Taliban are going to actually give up the ETIM and move them back across the Wakhan corridor into Xinjiang province, or give them up to the Chinese, I don't think it's going to happen in the way that it's not a jigsaw puzzle that the pieces fit in very closely with each other. It's going to be very messy, and for the time being, I would say the mess is likely to continue. The instability is likely to continue. Taliban is on a massive territorial advantage and taking over bigger and bigger chunks of territory. But even if they approach Kabul, even if they take over Kabul, let me say this, that it will not be an uncontested victory. It will not be a smooth transition. They're more than likely to be a very messy transition. If you look at the fact that the warlords are all back in action against the Taliban, the ANSDF, which is the Afghan National Security and Defense Forces, have collapsed in some degrees, but there is still some fire back in them. We will hope that they will get the kind of outside support that they need to be able to at least push back the Taliban somewhat. The Taliban, on their part, I would say, are playing a very smart game, and are playing a much smarter game this time than earlier. If you look at their tactics, their first moves have been in the northern provinces of Afghanistan, especially the border provinces with Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Iran. And why is that? Couple of reasons. One, a lot of the customs revenue comes from these border posts, especially on the Iran end. That is Islam Kala, so Herat, and all those other provinces and other border crossings in those provinces. On the Tajik front, on the Turkmen front, apart from the revenue, they are also plugging the holes for a potential Northern Alliance to develop against them, which is a much smarter political sort of military move this time than earlier. Please remember that in the earlier avatar in the 90s, their opposition came from the north, from the Panjshir Valley, from Ahmad Shah Massoud and the Northern Alliance, which at that time was supported by India, Russia, and Iran. That now is a different story. So now the Pakistan, we must also remember that the Taliban, for all their protestations of independence, are not independent of Pakistan. The Pakistan military, the Pakistan intelligence military complex control the Taliban today as well as they did a few years ago. So a lot of what they are doing is directed from Pakistan. So how it plays out is how powerful Pakistan believes itself to be in being able to handle the mess in Afghanistan and the subsequent quest for stability in Afghanistan, as well as a subsequent quest for legitimacy for any future Taliban government. None of this is easy. So there is still a lot of room for outside players to get in, even at this point.